45 is a year that I moved to Selmore Community. And before that, I'm going to go back and start. Jay said to give you some idea of something about who I am and what. Can you hear now? Better? Is that better? Okay. So my family today consists of a lady named Mary Lee Melton. We have 2 kids and 7 grandkids. Is that right, Lynell? Okay. So to start with, let me give you a word that has been very prominent in my life from the time I can really remember, and I didn't pick up on this till I was probably 25 or 30 years old to look back to when I was a kid. But that word is the providence of God. And Webster says the providence of God is a benevolent guidance of something provided for you that you really had no idea how it come about, okay? So when you look back 20, 25 years, 5 years, or yesterday, there's things happen in your life you didn't have no way of knowing how that was going to turn out. You didn't have no way of knowing how it started. But it's there. Some people refer that to as an open door. The door is open, you can walk through it, you can accept it or you can reject it. And that's the way God works. It's there, and sometimes I took advantage of those and many times I did not. But some of them have been, it's been a very prominent thing in my life. Okay, so I was born December the 12th, 1937. And if you do some fast math, that's 85 years, and I'll be coming up on 86 years shortly. First thing I can remember going back is being turned up on my stomach and somebody swatting the tar out of my rear end saying, "Cry, cry." No, I can't quite remember that, but going back a long ways. Okay. So I have progressed, and then I was thinking, what kind of a world have I got into and what's going to happen to me down through the road here? Okay, Mary mentioned something that I've got down here that was very typical, and that is poor people. How many of you were raised poor people? Everybody. I'm not saying the guy told me once that back in those days, you didn't worry about having no money because there was nothing to buy if you had money. Okay. So Mary also mentioned being raised on a small farm, and that was something that was very typical of this time because, like she said, went through depression, hard times like that. World War I is over, and World War II has not started yet, but still people they're just poor. They don't have anything to live by. So a typical farm. Some things that was had on that typical farm. Almost every farm, to start with, it was a rental place, right? Yeah. Okay. So most people lived, or a lot of people, at least half the people lived on a rental place to start with. Okay, I've got 4 things down here that was very common to a small thing, and Larry Heatherly touched on some of those the other night. That every place, every poor farm around here had in common. One was no electricity, right? I lived in 4 different places till the time I was 8, and not a one of those had electricity, or as Larry mentioned the other night, the empties that went with it, like the bathroom, the running water in the house. None of those 4 places had running water in the house. So, no electricity. The other one was no water in the house. The other was everybody had a large garden. Why did you have a large garden? If you didn't put up enough stuff in the summertime out of a garden, you were going to have to be hungry through the winter, okay? So the other was some animals. Almost everyone had at least 1 horse. The horse was transportation. I can remember the first vehicle that I saw that we had, I think, was an old pickup, and I have no idea what year it was kind of a flatbed truck thing. Okay. Everybody had 1 or 2 milk cows. Why do you have milk cows? Everybody wanted milk. What else do you get from cows? Butter. So you've got cows for milk and butter. Every farm had some hogs. Why did you have hogs?
Bacon.
Bacon, something to eat for breakfast. The hogs also provided lard, grease. What did you make from lard, grease? Lye soap. Anybody ever use some lye soap? Took a bath with lye soap many times. The other thing was chickens. Everybody had 20, 25 chickens. Again, chickens provided you something to eat, and occasionally you had enough you could sell to make some money from them. So, no electricity. I'll do a little illustration real fast here, take up a little time. Who's doing the lights? Hold on just a minute there. Now, how many of you ever had to live just by a light? Okay, now when I was a kid growing up, along with a lot of the rest of you guys like Larry, no electricity. And this is the light that we live by at night. Okay, Karen, you wouldn't really want to come up here and do that? Leave? Okay, go ahead. But anyway, you have a picture in your mind of certain things that you can remember forever. And one of them is of my mother sitting at a table by this light, and sewing, and she didn't quilt a quilt at night because she couldn't see, but she pieced it together. So that she had little cardboard patterns, and she would take the material on the cardboard pattern and cut those out at night, and then she could sew them back up in the daytime to make quilts. I have no idea how many quilts my mother made, but she would piece those together. Now this one here that they have there, you can come up and look at it after we get done. But the pieces are all put together stitch by hand, okay? And then talk about finances. Like I said, we didn't have no money, and if you had money, you couldn't buy nothing, but still you had to buy the necessity. You had to buy flour or sugar, stuff like that. So where did you get the money? My mother would take these quilts, and Mary may remember there was a store on the north side of the square. And the guy in that store would buy those quilts from her. She might try to make about 2 of them a year. And he'd take them in there, and he would give her $10 a piece for those. So what? Okay. Just let over the chair, the girl. Thank you. Okay, like I said, I went to lived in 4 different places. I'll touch on just a little bit here about entertainment. Larry talked the other night about his entertainment was throwing rocks. I can remember living in one place, and my aunt and a cousin that I had come to visit, and was visiting with her grandmother. And my mom and my aunt are sitting where they can see out the window. And they see these 2 little boys' heads go by the window. Okay, we made about 4 or 5 trips by the window. And one of them said, "What are those boys up to anyway?" Grandmother had a red rooster. Meanest dude you've ever seen in your life. And I'm sure it was my cousin's idea, because I would not have thought of it to do something like that, but grandmother had some sticks in the smokehouse. So we got us a stick, and we started whopping on that rooster. Well, but they would go around the house, and by the time we'd made about 5 or 6 trips around, they come to see about it. Well, the rooster didn't have no feathers left. We had beat every feather off of that rooster. Now then, discipline. Yeah. And I've told some guys in Sunday school class that my mother had a yardstick. And these yardsticks you get today, they're the little flimsy things about that wide. They're made out of pine, or you can take them and you can just snap them in 2. The one my mother had was oak. It was about that thick and about that wide. And she used that till I think I was 20 years old. She finally broke it. Okay, education. Real early on education. Larry talked about a 1-room school. I also started out in a 1-room school. And did you walk to school? How far?
It seemed like about 3 miles, but it
well,
was
okay.
about 3/4 to a mile.
About the same thing. We lived up on a ridge and had to walk about a mile off this ridge down into what is Woods' Fork, but where Jeannie Clark lives today. That's where my uncle lived, was down where Jeannie Clark lives today. Okay, so I walked from there, started school, walked down there, and there's a couple in church today who live where my school teacher lived, back up Woods' Fork. She walked down the hill into Woods' Fork and then started walking down the creek to Liberty School. And like I said, I think it was about 3 miles that she walked, 2.5, 3 miles. She was a school bus. As she come down the creek walking, the kids would come out from their houses and join her, and they'd walk down the creek with her to school, and then they'd walk home with her. Okay, I come off the hill and met them there. If I missed them, they would put a rock on the gate post, say they'd already been there. Come home at night, I'd take the rock off, okay? So if I had missed them, then I'd have to run and catch up with them. Or if the rock wasn't on the gate post, then I knew they hadn't got there yet, and I could wait on them. Okay, enough of that. That teacher was Juanita Diffendepper, and there was 5 of us kids in that first grade class, and the schoolhouse burned after my first grade. I wound up going to Spokane to school. I hate to admit that, but I did. My cousin and one of the girl, the only girl in the class, they got to go to Ozark to school. Frank Chavis and Glenn Cobb both moved to California for 1 year. Like I said, I went to Chestnut Ridge to live for 1 year, and then all 5 of us came back to Ozark when we were in the 3rd grade. 3rd grade, and we all 5 graduated together. Income, I mentioned the eggs. Sell something if you could. Have you ever knew what a cream separator was? I don't ever remember doing that, but I know a lot of the poor people on those farms at that time had a cream separator, and if they had 4, 5, 6 cows, they would sell some cream, but I don't know how much it would bring or anything like that. Okay, that's pretty well got me up to 1945 when I moved to the Selmore area. So, Mary, if you want to take and go from there on up to a few more years, go. Find my notes, see where Mary left me off at here. Okay, I'm going to back up and cover it where Mary left off here in 1945. Like I said, that's when we moved up to Selmore, and the farm we moved on to is where Walmart sits today. That farm had 500 acres in it. And needless to say, farming has changed from the time I was born up in 1945 and from there on. But some things that's happened, and you guys can think of them. How many of you were born before 1945? Anybody? Yeah, Roy has? Okay, a couple. Okay, I'm going to just mention a couple of things for you younger generation, things that's happened that really influenced us, this age group of young people that's coming on. World War II is over, okay, in 1945. I can remember when it was over. I do not remember when. You remember World War I or World War II started? Do you remember Pearl Harbor? Okay, I don't either, but I do remember when the war was over. The atom bomb. The United States has just dropped the atom bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan and ended World War II. The Korean War has got started. Some traders in the United States have sold the formula for building the atom bomb, have sold that to the Russians. So this is the beginning of what's known as the Cold War. And it lasted all the way, the Cold War has run all the way through my military career through the 70s up until about 1985. Okay, so Cold War is going on. The farm, like I said, is 500 acres. And here's the biggie. Along with that 500-acre farm was a $30,000 debt. Now, okay, $30,000, I don't care what time of year or what time of you're talking about, $30,000 is a lot of money. But farming has changed. We had an H International tractor. We still had the horses, still run horses. We used horses. The machinery we had was almost all modified horse machinery, modified to be pulled by a tractor. We moved from milking 1 or 2 cows just to survive to milking to 10 or 15 of them. How did you milk those cows, Larry? 2 hands at a time. It's called automatic 2-hand milk machines. And the thing of Ozark has got a cheese factory. Do you remember when that cheese factory was built? I do not.
I do.
Go ahead.
Right off of the square. Right.
But when? What year? What year?
Oh gosh.
I have no idea when it was built. But anyway, that was a big money thing.
About the 30s, Joe Major had it.
Yeah. Okay, anyway, that was a big thing that you could milk cows and you could sell this, what they call grade C milk, and they could make cheese out of it, okay? So, that is basically where I started on the farm here in, just here north of Selmore. 1946, I'm 8.5 years old. And again, most of this machinery is horse-drawn machinery, and so the field where a Walmart sits today, with the hay field, it was stacked. They made big stacks of hay, loose hay, not baled hay, it was all loose hay. And they had what they called a bull rake, and they'd go across the field, they'd pick up hay, and then they'd dump it. And they'd line up a windrow going across the field. Okay, then you had the tractor that had a bull rake on it with about 7 or 8, 9 or 10 big long wooden teeth on the front of it. It would take this tractor and you would go down this windrow picking up the hay, and you'd haul it back, and the guys would stack it with a pitchfork. I'm 8.5 years old, okay? And I watched them drive this tractor. And I figured, okay, I think I know how to run this thing. So I don't know who told me, but they said, you think you can go get us a fork full of hay? And I said, yeah, I think I can. So I did. Did that the rest of the day, the rest of the morning was. That night, when the rest of the afternoon, that night, they said, you think you can drive this tractor to the house? Yeah, I think I can. So I drove it down what is probably the northbound lane of Highway 65 today, through the field, through a barn lot, up around to the gas pumps. And about the time I got to the gas pump is when the explosion happened. My mother stepped out the front door. Now, I don't want to repeat what she said. I was not privy to what was said that night, but the next morning I drove that tractor back to the hay field again. Okay? So, again, thrashing machines, baling hay, and stuff like that, it was mad labor intensive. And it took a lot of work. Somewhere in the 1950s, we got electricity. I think it was probably 51, 52, somewhere through there that we got electricity in the house. Then we got a refrigerator, and there was a slaughter plant, and you could butcher beef and keep beef in a deep freeze to have beef to eat. Locker plant in Ozark. You remember the locker plant?
Oh, yes.
Okay, they had a place in Ozark where it had a locker plant. You could go rent a tray, like a great big, humongous deep freeze. And you could store your beef and stuff in there. But work on this farm, again, 500 acres of it, 5 o'clock every morning. I don't care whether it was the middle of the winter. It was 5 o'clock, go get the cows to milk them. And it was usually 9 or 10 o'clock at night before we got back in bed. Some big changes happened through 1950. Again, 1950s, like I said, we've been farming that since 1945.
Don't forget the drought that we had.
We will, yes. There's always been a drought. As long as I can remember, there's been one drought after another, and through the 50s there was a humongous drought. But some big changes for the farm-wise was we built a 6-stall concrete milk barn, grade A milk barn. Now we sell milk to drink. Sold it in Springfield to drink. They bottled it and bring it and sell it. That grade A milk barn, we moved from milking 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 cows by hand to milking 45 to 50 of those cows with milking machines, okay? My mother did most of the milking, okay? She milked every night, especially sometimes we'd help her in the morning, but especially through the summer when we were working the fields and stuff, my mother did all the milking. As a matter of fact, I have a younger brother. And my mother milked those 50 cows that morning. My younger brother was born at 11:30.
Oh my goodness.
We didn't make her milk that night. We didn't help her. Okay, that's up through probably 1952. So Mary, if you want to go on up, anything else you want to add up to the 60s? Go ahead. I want to back up then to, as Mary's indicated, the different people then through 1960. And then, how much time have we got?
Hour and a half.
Another hour and a half. What time is it? 20 till. Okay, I think I can make that. I still got to save some time for Jeannie Clark. Okay, through 1950s, 1960. Again, like working a 500-acre farm, and basically 3 of us working that farm. It takes a few hard hands now, and it is labor intensive. Also, you notice I said I lived in 4 different houses, and I did not mention no church, okay? Reason I didn't mention no church, activities in the church, is because there was none, okay? We did not live close to a church. The means for travel, again, would have been the old truck, which got maybe 20, 30 miles per hour. Gasoline was expensive, so you either had to walk or ride a horse, and that was just not practical. Again, Bible study, Bible reading at home was non-existent. So through 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, the primary thing in my life was work. And attend Selmore Baptist Church, maybe, I've got my notes here, once a month. That's probably exaggerating. It was probably once every 3 months. But somewhere through that time, a Sunday school teacher had mentioned something to me about being saved and accepting Jesus Christ. And I wasn't really a bad kid. Yeah, I beat the tar out of a rooster. But, and I got my mouth forced out with some Lysol a couple of times. But really, just working all the time and kind of a negative attitude and a bad attitude about life in general. But again, a Sunday school teacher had mentioned something about being saved, and I really didn't understand what he was talking about. But then through a preacher that Mary mentioned was Burkhalter, and revival was Max Hamilton, and that was a 2-week revival. Jay Scribner, could you live through a 2-week revival?
I could.
All right, let's try it and see what happens. But again, back in those days, that was the traditional thing, was a 2-week revival. Why we attended that, I have no earthly idea. But I think we attended almost every night that revival. And again, the Sunday school teacher talking about being saved, and I was under conviction. So during that Sunday school class, on the last Sunday of that revival, you know where the furnace room is? Down in the basement down here. That was a Sunday school class for 3 boys, okay? And that's where I bowed and accepted Christ.
Amen.
Okay, accepted Christ, and definitely I was a different individual after that, okay? But, like I said, work was a primary thing. So I accepted Jesus on one Sunday. Monday morning, what was I doing? 5 o'clock, went back to work. 2 weeks later, got baptized. Monday morning, 5 o'clock, back up and back to go to work. So through the 50s, up until I graduated, Jay, no one ever really explained to me what general salvation entailed. No one really talked to us about it. You just accepted Christ, you got baptized, and you're good forever. You're good till Christ comes back again, till you die and go to heaven. So nobody explained to us what sanctification is like through that period of time in your life. You're just on your own to do that. So anyway, again, I was not too bad of a kid, and maybe after I got saved, maybe I was a little bit better. I don't know. I don't remember getting my mouth forced out with too much soap after that. But anyway, a half a dozen providences of God up in my life until this time. And somewhere when I was a senior in high school, I had decided back maybe when I was junior, I was going to make the military a career. And somewhere in that time frame, guy just walked up to me and going down the hallway and said, "Dave, what are you doing tonight?" I said, I don't have no girlfriend to go with us, so I'm not done what I'm going to do. He said, how about going to Marine Corps Reserve with me tonight? That sounds good to me. So I did join the Marine Corps Reserves through my senior year in high school. Went to summer camp, Camp Melton, and was in the Marine Corps enough to realize I did not want to spend 20 years carrying a rifle around. So I come back, that was in the summer of 1956, okay? So January 1957, I went to talk to the Air Force recruiter, joined the Air Force, and they had a lot better thing going. I went through basic training, January 1957, went to tech school for defense radar, air traffic control. From that, went to serve a year in Korea. From Korea, come right back to the same base I took basic training at. It was also a radar air traffic control site in San Antonio. So, after being there for a while, now I'm over 20 years old now, and I'm beginning to think maybe it's time I need a wife. So, again, another providence of God, and I won't go into all the details of that, but anyway, I wound up at Portland, Missouri, compliments of the Air Force. Everybody know where Portland, Missouri is at? Out from Highway 60. That one, I tell everybody when I tell you there, it's a prison today, right? I spent a year and a half there. But it was an air traffic control site when I was there, okay? The primary reason that I wanted to come to Portland was because there was a nice young lady here at Selmore that had got my eye, and I wanted to latch on to her. So I come back here, talked to her about that situation, and in May 1st, 1960, we got married. That was 63 years ago, right? Okay. Okay, you got anything else you want to add, Mary? Anything else you want to add?
Just that you left out about the oat bugs.
The oat bugs. Okay, we'll back up to the oat. Does anybody know what an oat bug is? Mary Lee and I are probably the only ones who know what an oat bug is. Back in the days that I was talking about in 1945, 46, 47, and through there, farming, like I said, is different. Everything, every land around here is plowed up, it's sowed in grain, it's harvested, combined, or something like that, you know, some type of grain through those years. This ground where you're sitting right here, I have plowed this and cut oats off of it, right where you're sitting today, okay? Mary mentioned the early church. The ramp that goes in by the old building over there, that was where the fence was on the north and south boundary of this church for many years, okay? But anyway, so the old church over there, all it had was screens on it. Air conditioning was the wind blowing through it. Those little bugs that got into the grain, they called oat bugs, and they could go through the screen wire. And you're sitting there trying to listen to the preacher, and those little dudes would get on you and they bite. So you're constantly thought it was a Pentecostal church for a little bit. So that was the oat bug story. Okay, where did I get up to? 1960. Barely, and we get married. We go to Texas, back to Texas, when they closed the radar site at Portland. The providence of God, I'll go through that real fast if I got a couple of minutes here. Like I said, I got to Fordham compliments of the Air Force, an Air Force program that they had on re-enlistment. That program only lasted 2 years, and they did away with it. The other providence of God is Portland Air Force. I got here in June of 1959. They closed that site in April of 1960. That's before Mary Lee and I even got married. They shut the radar off. So anything time flows out of that would not have happened, okay? All right. Mary Lee and I spent from 1960 until 1977 various assignments, some good assignments, some terrible assignments. Some good things happened because of it. We've got a son and a daughter, compliments for those assignments, and 7 grandkids. We left Ozona, Texas September of 1962, en route to Spain. We spent 2 years in Spain, and then from there we went back to Condon, Oregon, and wound up my military career in 1977. Retired from Clovis Air Force Base as an NCIC of the 27th Tank Fighter Wing, Master Sergeant. Moved back here in 1977 and spent some time just getting orientated into the church, how the church was functioning and stuff. And like Mary said, it was a small church. But with a small church and people move in 1970, Larry, correct me if I'm wrong here, but around about 1976 into 77, the church over there, the building itself for worship service was full and running over. You couldn't have packed another person in it. When people are packed in and you can't get nobody else in, somebody's going to get upset because you're sitting in my seat or something. So how many people left the church? Larry, any idea how many people? Several of them. And they went to start a new church out at what is Eastern Gate today. Okay, I came in 1977 or something like that time frame, and through 78 and 79. And somewhere through that time frame, we got a pastor by the name of Lawrence Henry. And again, a business meeting at that time frame would become to a business meeting once a month. My wife said 5 more minutes, is that right? Okay. But anyway, you come to a business meeting, and if you had a motion or you had an idea, you can just make a motion and they'd vote it up or down, whatever they want to. And somebody made a motion to, we had a young man leading the music. We need a young man to lead also the youth. So, yeah, it's a good idea. We got one. 2 months later, we had a secretary, treasurer. Laura, she took care of all the finances, and we had a deacons meeting the morning before the worship service started. She walks in. She says, gentlemen, the church doesn't have enough money in the bank to pay salaries this month. So we talked it over and said, okay, we're going to have to let the youth director go. Lawrence Henry says, this does not work. We're going to have to establish some committees, get things organized. As a result of that, we started a budget committee. The first budget for this church was $15,000 for a year. Doesn't sound like much today when the budget's what, Laurie, 200 and something? I don't remember what the budget is for today. But anyway, from that point on, we worked through the budget committee, started a long-range planning committee to do different projects, and we have worked through that, and God has been good to us, to what we have today, this building here. We built this fellowship hall over here, and again, it doesn't look like much today, but again, when it was built, it was a big accomplishment to build that. One thing happened out of that is we added another restrooms facilities, men's and ladies' restrooms. Somewhere in the process of building that, somebody accidentally with a backhoe backed into the church outhouse and knocked it down and filled it over. We had a deacon that used that facility very regularly, and he was upset, to say the least. And I thought for a little while that Marvin Allen was going to leave the church because we had took down the church outhouse. People in this church have been around here for a long time. Hope it will continue to be for another 100 years at least. Jay, if you want to ask us some questions, I'll try to go through them if you don't get too complicated. And I'm going to try to get Jeannie Clark to say something. Jeannie is one of our oldest members here. Jeannie, do you want to say anything?
No, not this time.
Jeannie's got a birthday Sunday. Here you go, Jay.